2024 NBA free agency might seem like a really long way away, and in some ways it is, but in the NBA, with as many trade rumors, with as much player movement as we have every single year, it's never too early to think about what that free agency class is going to look like a year from now, where each of those players are going to be. So I'm going to do my best one whole year in advance to predict 2024 NBA free agency. First up, let's talk about Pascal Siakam. I've made recent videos about him. Here we are in late August, and as of now, Pascal Siakam is a Toronto Raptor, and he has not yet signed an extension, and he probably won't be signing an extension with Toronto because of the amount of money that he can make as a free agent in 2024. And this is a really difficult thing to predict because a week from now, 2 weeks from now, a month from now, at the deadline, Pascal Siakam could end up on a different team. But right now, the two options here are, like, Siakam's going to re-sign presumably with whatever team he's on when he reaches free agency, whether that be Toronto, because it does seem like he wants to stay there. If they want to keep him or not is the question, but I think he does want to stay there, especially because he can make the most money there. Or if he ends up on a team like Atlanta, a variety of other trade destinations, he's probably re-signing there as well. What I'm assuming will happen at this point, given some more recent rumors that we've gotten since I made that Siakam video, is he's gonna stay in Toronto on a big, massive contract, but kind of in like a Jaylen Brown sort of way, where like he signs the $300 million contract. That's my official prediction, is that he's gonna stay with Toronto next offseason as a free agent. He signs the contract, but basically from the moment that he signs it, the team is like, yeah, he might be here a year from now, 2 years from now. We don't really know. Like the direction of their team very clearly is more tilted towards Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby kind of timelines rather than Pascal Siakam. Not that he's that much older than them, but there's a difference between being a little bit off on timelines and being a little bit off on timelines and paying someone $300 million. And Siakam, I do think, is going to stay as a free agent in 2024. I think he's going to be in Toronto, but within a year or 2 years of signing that contract, it feels pretty likely he will be on a different team. Next up, you want to talk about something that's difficult to predict. What about James Harden? He is a 2024 free agent, and I would fully expect him to be a 2024 free agent. He opted into his contract to try and make as much money as possible in Philadelphia, and right now it's still, as of the recording of this video, late August, it still seems like he is just not going to play for Philly and could potentially end up somewhere else. My prediction is that the Harden Clippers trade does eventually happen. Maybe it involves a third team to try and add some extra value to Philadelphia, but at a certain point, the Sixers are going to get nervous about Joel Embiid being unhappy, and they just can't go into the year with James Harden refusing to play. And Tyrese Maxey's good enough to be a really good guard on a really good team and kind of replace a lot of what Harden does. If you get some pieces back for Harden, you can still be a championship competitive team this upcoming season if you're Philadelphia. I truly believe that. And so that probably means that James Harden is going to be a Clipper. And at that point, once he gets to LA, they don't really have a choice but to give him the big contracts. And I think they would be very willing to do it if they feel like Kawhi and Paul George, those guys, can be healthy as well. That trio of players, despite whatever you may think about the injury issues of the two wings and Harden's playoff struggles himself, those three guys together and some half decent, competent NBA players around them is an incredible group, and one that realistically could compete for a title, which would be massive for the Clippers as they go into their new building next year. I don't see a situation in which they trade for Harden and then don't sign him to a new contract in the summer of 2024. That's assuming that Harden gets traded to the Clippers in the first place. If he stays with Philly and plays out the year, and maybe they can mend the things in Philadelphia and maybe re-signs there or elsewhere. But right now, my prediction is that James Harden signs a big contract extension, re-signs with the Clippers in 2024, a year from now. Next up is one that people aren't really thinking about. How about DeMar DeRozan in Chicago? In 2024, he's going to be 35 years old. Still, I would assume, going to be a productive player this upcoming season. He's been really good in Chicago and someone that probably goes pretty well underrated throughout the entire league. This is going to be a bit of a weird prediction. I'm just going to go and throw out that I think DeMar DeRozan is going to be a Laker a year from now. This has almost happened a few times now. When he left San Antonio, there were rumors that he was going to sign the big mid-level exception to go to the Lakers and just try and win there. And at this point, when you think about what's happened in DeMar's career, gets traded for Kawhi, and the Raptors immediately win a title after struggling in the postseason for years there, goes to the Spurs, a perennially, historically successful franchise over the last 2 decades. They're just kind of decent, but never really that great. Then goes to Chicago. At one point, they're the 1 seed. They look really good, and then everybody gets hurt and falls back down to earth. And at this point, if you're 35-year-old DeMar DeRozan, you look at your free agency options, and maybe there's a $20-25 million a year contract from this team or that team, or maybe you become, the Fred VanVleet of the offseason and someone gives you this big deal on just, a couple of years. But realistically, when you look at your options, you say, oh, I could do all that and I could make this money, or I could go make $10 million a year. I could play for the Lakers, play alongside AD, LeBron, assuming those guys are both still there. And at that point, you're thinking, now I have a chance to really win a title. And of course, I get to go back to LA, which has been a goal for him for years, it seemed like. Again, even going back to the previous offseason. So this one is a bit of a far out there prediction, but I think DeMar DeRozan is going to be an LA Laker a year from now. Now, the obvious counter to that is that Chicago has invested in this team, re-signing Nikola Vucevic and obviously having Zach LaVine on a big deal. So they could always just give DeRozan a ton of money to keep him, which is what they did with Vucevic. But not knowing the direction of this team, no Lonzo for this upcoming season, makes it really difficult for me to predict what Chicago's plans are going to be. And they could very easily be in a rebuild a year from now, allowing DeRozan to go to the Lakers. Next up now, let's talk about Klay Thompson, one of the more interesting 2024 free agents in the class. And obviously Golden State has committed to Chris Paul by trading for him. Steph's on the big contract. They just re-signed Draymond. So the assumption is that Klay is just going to continue to run it back with the team as well. He has some pretty lofty contract expectations, but so did Draymond, and they were able to get that figured out. Of course, they have Wiggins. They dumped the Jordan Poole contract so that they could bring in Draymond, or bring back Draymond, I should say, and the cost not be too crazy. I do think that there are going to be some options. Maybe the Lakers option is a thing for Klay as well. Maybe he just wants to get away from Golden State, trying to find some success elsewhere. But I also thought those things with Draymond, and it just never happened. Obviously, the difference is Klay's coming off all these injuries over the last handful of seasons, and Draymond, despite his drop-off offensively, is still one of the best, if not the best, defensive players in the entire league. And Klay, still a very good shooter, but is up and down and doesn't have that elite skill set on one side of the floor the way that Draymond did. Having said that, my prediction is it's going to be a little bit tenuous. It's going to be a little bit weird, but I still think Golden State's going to be really good this year, which means Klay Thompson's going to re-sign with Golden State in a year. Last up, let's talk about Jrue Holiday. This is a weird one. He's got a player option. Obviously, the Bucks brought back Brook Lopez. They were able to bring back Chris Middleton. Clearly, they're just running it back this season, Jrue Holiday being a part of that. But he is a free agent 2024 with that player option, as I mentioned, and things have been falling off a little bit for him offensively, especially in the postseason lately, and he's still an elite defensive player. But I could see the Bucks looking at this situation and thinking, do we want to try and maybe go a little bit younger, whether that be as a sign and trade for Jrue Holiday, or whether that be just letting him walk completely. The concern there obviously is making sure that Giannis is still happy, that you're not kind of ruining what you have there by trying to outsmart yourself and go a little bit younger. All of that to me depends on how well Milwaukee plays this year. They still have all the pieces to be one of the best teams in the conference, if not the best team in the entire conference, and there is a path where they win a title this year. They bring back Jrue Holiday and everything's fine. He's also kind of tossed out the idea of maybe retiring at some point as well. With that contract being over, that's another possibility. I would assume, and my prediction at this point would be that he is going to stay with Milwaukee, but I don't feel that great about that prediction because there's a lot of volatility in terms of what could potentially happen with the Bucks this year. New coach, bringing back some of the old guys this offseason, and then obviously adding even more expense to that with a new Jrue Holiday contract, with him declining offensively. Prediction is that he stays, but I don't really feel that confident about it. Now, obviously, there's a lot more free agents to talk about in 2024, and we'll get to those throughout the season once the season does actually start. But these are the 5 guys that I'm most interested in. Some of them aging, some of them are going to have a huge market, some of them not so much. So really, I'm curious what you guys think are going to happen with each of these 5 players. Put your predictions down in the comments. Where are these guys going to end up as 2024 free agents? Like I said, I know it's weird to think about free agency a full year in advance, but I'm trying to think about where these teams are going to be in a year. That helps inform how good I think they're going to be this season, as well as cap space, all those things. Like I said, we'll talk about that all throughout the year, but it's fun for me to go and start thinking about a free agency class that, yes, maybe doesn't have a ton of big names, but still a lot of impactful players and some really interesting and intriguing decisions to make for teams as well as for players.